The relationships between China and the EU stands at a critical historical juncture.
China just humiliated Europe's top leaders on the world stage, while US farmers are collapsing under crushing debt. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is demanding a weaker dollar to save America's faltering economy. These dramatic events aren't random. They reveal a global power shift rewriting the rules. Watch closely, because the future of economic dominance is being decided right now. Chapter 1. China humiliates Europe. The recent China-EU summit wasn't just a diplomatic meeting, it was a power statement. Think about this. EU leaders arrive expecting serious negotiations, only to be ushered into a bus with no red carpet, no welcome ceremony, and no honoring protocol. This cold shoulder wasn't a scheduling error or bad luck. It was a carefully orchestrated public humiliation designed to send a crystal-clear message to Europe. The summit was wrapped up quickly with zero trade deals or strategic agreements on the table. Instead, all they managed was a vague, almost meaningless statement on climate change. No joint plans on global stability, no easing of trade tensions, just polite words floating in the air, without any real weight behind them. Why does this matter? Because in high-stakes diplomacy, optics are everything. A bus transport instead of a grand welcome isn't just logistics. It's a symbol that China has recalibrated its priorities. Europe has dropped from partner to spectator in Beijing's global chess game. President Xi Jinping's cold distancing shows Europe no longer commands the respect it once enjoyed. The very fact that leaders left Beijing with little more than a climate memo tells us the old Europe-China partnership is over. Is Europe still shaping global affairs, or are they now watching from the sidelines? This wasn't just a diplomatic slap on the wrist, it was a loud, unmistakable proclamation that China's focus has shifted away from an EU that sanctions and alienates and towards a broader, more pragmatic global strategy. Chapter 2. EU's self-inflicted crisis. Europe's woes don't end with diplomacy. In fact, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real crisis is self-inflicted, economically and industrially. The EU made a bold move to cut off cheap Russian energy imports, largely for geopolitical and ideological reasons. The intended consequence was to pressure Moscow. The actual consequence? Massive damage to European industries that rely on affordable natural gas. Natural gas prices in Europe have surged to record levels, driven by lost access to Russian pipelines and a scramble to secure liquefied natural gas from other sources, particularly the United States, sales that come with a steep price tag. Higher energy costs have cascaded through manufacturing, making European chemical plants, plastics producers, and heavy industries uncompetitive on the global stage. Meanwhile, China pulls a very different energy play. According to the International Monetary Fund World Economic Outlook, through long-term contracts with Russia, Beijing secures massive volumes of natural gas at discounts ranging between 20 and 30% below global market rates. To put it simply, China's factories hum with energy 30% cheaper than comparable European plants. Here's the truth. Europe chose sanctions over industrial pragmatism and is now paying the price in lost competitiveness. Factories close, exports shrink, jobs vanish. This energy shift is not a mere side effect. It strikes at the heart of Europe's manufacturing base, industries that require reliable, affordable energy to survive. When cheaper alternatives disappear, production moves. And in this case, production goes directly east, where energy is both abundant and affordable. Europe's insistence on a maximalist sanctions regime and holding the line may bolster political rhetoric, but on the ground, it's a recipe for industrial collapse. If the situation persists, they expect further erosion of the EU's economic muscle. Chapter 3. The Trade Deficit Trap. The economic fallout from diplomatic failures and energy miscalculations is showing up sharply in trade figures. In the first half of 2025 alone, Europe's trade deficit with China widened to an astonishing $170 billion. That's not a temporary dip, it's a structural crisis signaling deep-rooted problems. Why is this deficit so large and persistent? Two main reasons. Europe depends heavily on Chinese imports, from rare earth minerals critical for high-tech manufacturing to electronics and chemical components, but finds it nearly impossible to access Chinese markets at comparable levels for its goods. China isn't just exporting low-cost products anymore. It's climbing the technological ladder, producing advanced electric vehicles, clean energy tech, and sophisticated machinery that competes directly with European products on both price and quality. What's more revealing is China's strategic pivot in foreign investments. Instead of investing broadly in Western Europe, Beijing is funneling approximately $10 billion into Eastern Europe, especially Hungary. Why Hungary? It offers access to the EU's single market while benefiting from cheap Russian energy, avoiding the severe energy crunch plaguing Western Europe. This shift exposes an uncomfortable truth. Western Europe's economies are fragile, losing industrial competitiveness, while Eastern Europe becomes a gateway for China's expanding influence inside the European Union. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen demands Beijing rebalance trade relations, but the leverage is weak at best. Europe's high energy costs, shrinking industrial base, and increasing dependency on Chinese imports give China all the advantages. The EU is trying to play defense with a hand that's already losing. Chapter 4. U.S. Farms in Crisis. American farmers are on the front line of a trade war fallout that's crushing rural America. The tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on Chinese goods have caused a sharp spike in costs, especially machinery prices, which have surged by approximately 30%. For farmers already operating on razor-thin margins, this increase is devastating. In 2025, 173 small farms were forced into bankruptcy, a clear indication of the harsh financial realities facing the agricultural sector. The reason machinery costs have risen so dramatically is straightforward. Tariffs have made imported farm equipment and essential parts more expensive. Combining harvesters, tractors, and other critical machinery now costs significantly more, boosting the operational overhead farmers must cover. This increase doesn't occur in isolation. Rising costs for fuel, fertilizers, and seeds, none of which are immune to tariff impact or inflation, combine to squeeze farmer budgets even tighter. The debt situation amplifies the crisis. U.S. farm debt is projected to hit a staggering $560 billion in 2025. Many farmers are no longer able to finance their operations from earnings alone. Instead, they rely increasingly on credit just to cover day-to-day expenses. This growing dependence on debt elevates the risk of insolvency and threatens the financial stability of family farms and rural communities. Bankruptcy filings reflect this financial distress. The spike in farm bankruptcies, already a 5-year high, marks a dramatic reversal by signaling that financial pressures on rural America are intensifying rapidly. Chapter 5. Losing China's market. The tariff war's damage goes beyond rising costs. Perhaps the most painful blow to American agriculture is the loss of China's massive food import market. China, once the largest buyer of U.S. soybeans, pork, and grains, has decoupled from American agriculture completely. Instead, Beijing has diverted its purchases toward Brazil and other members of the BRICS alliance. This shift is more than a mere trading blip. It's a permanent realignment with severe consequences. For decades, China offered a reliable and lucrative market, providing American farmers with stable income that helped sustain their operations. Losing this pivotal buyer destabilizes the entire sector, driving down export volumes and commodity prices at a time when costs are rising. Government subsidies, though sizable, can only partially mitigate the financial damage. They cannot replace the sustained income stream that comes from a large, reliable trading partner like China. More importantly, years of relationship building and trust have been lost through the trade war, which took time and effort to cultivate. This change reflects a broader geopolitical and economic realignment. China's strategy to reduce dependency on U.S. agricultural goods and diversify its suppliers toward Brazil and other BRICS countries reshapes global agricultural geopolitics. For U.S. farmers, the lesson is severe. Trade wars can quickly and permanently change the competitive landscape in ways that no subsidy program can easily undo. Chapter 6. Farm Subsidies and the Debt Spiral. To shore up a struggling agricultural sector, Washington is now shelling out more than $20 billion annually in subsidies, direct payments, safety nets, and other financial support aimed at preventing widespread collapse. But this is a political and financial tightrope. Can the government keep its foot in this massive bill? Every subsidy dollar adds to the national debt, raising thorny questions about fiscal sustainability. Either federal aid continues to grow, worsening fiscal strain, or rural America faces even deeper economic distress. Subsidies treat the symptoms, but not the cause. They provide temporary relief, but do not address the structural issues behind the farm crisis. Soaring input costs, tariff barriers, loss of export markets, and mounting debt. This widening debt spiral creates a vicious cycle. Farmers borrow more to manage costs. Subsidies prop up faltering incomes, yet the underlying market challenges remain unresolved. The political calculus becomes ever more complicated as rural voters demand protection, while the broader economy strains under debt pressures. The future looks uncertain. Without a major policy shift, be it trade normalization or energy and input cost relief, farm bankruptcies will likely continue rising. Rural communities risk long-term decline, and the U.S. agricultural sector faces a historic crossroads. The farm sector is grappling with an unprecedented convergence of financial stressors fueled by protectionist policies and global market shifts. For American farmers and the nation's food security, ignoring these challenges risks deeper economic and social fallout that no number of subsidies can fully fix. The key questions are: will policymakers learn from these outcomes? Can rural America be saved before it's too late? The stakes are high, not just for farmers, but for the entire country's economic resilience and geopolitical standing. Chapter 7: Trump's Dollar Trap. Donald Trump publicly insists he wants a strong US dollar. It sounds straightforward. A stronger currency means confidence in the economy, right? But his trade policies fundamentally demand the opposite. By slapping tariffs on Chinese imports and others, Trump aimed to protect American manufacturing and reduce trade deficits. But tariffs raise production costs for US businesses. When your raw materials and machinery become more expensive due to tariffs, your overall costs skyrocket. To counter these higher costs and keep American exports competitive, a weaker dollar becomes a necessity. A weaker currency effectively makes US goods cheaper abroad, helping manufacturers sell more. So even with his public rhetoric, Trump's action creates a demand for a weaker dollar. But it's not a simple fix-it, it's a trap. Weakening the dollar means import prices also rise. The majority of US manufacturers rely on imported intermediate goods, materials, components, and equipment, which make up around 51% of imports in the industrial supply chain. When the dollar falls, all these essential inputs become pricier, pushing production costs even higher. This dynamic creates an inflationary spiral. Higher production costs raise retail prices on everything from electronics to food, squeezing consumers and businesses alike. Yet keep the dollar strong, and exports suffer, dampening growth and employment in tradable sectors. Trump faces a paradox. He needs the dollar weak enough to boost exports, but strong enough to control inflation. His tariffs, intended as economic leverage, have undercut this balance, producing a currency conundrum with no easy resolution. Think about this. Tariffs pushed machinery and input costs up by roughly 30%, putting American industries and farmers under enormous pressure. The whole system tightens, sending shockwaves through the economy. Chapter 8: De-dollarization accelerates. Amid these domestic dilemmas, the US dollar's global stature faces a more profound challenge: de-dollarization. Around the world, trust in the dollar as the dominant reserve currency is evaporating. Leading this shift are global central banks. In 2025, they significantly boosted their gold reserves from about 15% to 25% of total foreign exchange reserves. This isn't just a cautious bet on a traditional store of value, but a clear signal of worry about the dollar's future. Why gold? Because gold doesn't carry the risks of a fiat currency. It's a hedge against inflation, geopolitical instability, and the loss of confidence in the US fiscal and monetary policy. Alongside gold buying, fewer countries are purchasing US Treasury bonds, the key instrument Washington uses to finance government spending. Declining foreign demand means the US must pay higher interest rates to borrow, worsening its budget deficit and fiscal sustainability challenges. At the same time, China and other strategic competitors are accelerating moves toward alternative payment systems and bilateral trade agreements designed to sidestep the greenback. With initiatives like the BRICS Development Bank and increased use of their currencies in trade, the unipolar dollar era is under severe stress. What this means for the United States is stark. Reduced demand for dollars and treasuries undermines Washington's financial leverage and raises borrowing costs, straining federal budgets and limiting policy flexibility. This currency shift reflects not just economic recalibration, but changing geopolitical realignments. The era where the dollar was the unchallenged global hegemon is giving way to a more multipolar financial world, with uncertain implications for U.S. power. Chapter 9. Trump's Economic Dilemma. Trump's goal is clear: devalue the dollar enough to boost exports without unleashing runaway inflation. But in today's globalized supply chains, that's nearly impossible. Why? Because intermediate goods, those imported raw materials and parts crucial to American manufacturing, constitute roughly 51% of total U.S. imports. When the dollar drops, these costs rise immediately, increasing expenses for factories, farms, and businesses. Add to this the tariffs-induced price hikes on machinery, chemicals, and other inputs, some of which have gone up by 30%, and the inflationary pressures multiply. It's a dangerous feedback loop. Tariffs and currency devaluation together enact a powerful squeeze in production costs. For the average American household, this means more expensive goods, higher energy costs, and reduced purchasing power. Inflation hits everything from groceries to gasoline, deepening economic anxiety. On the business side, manufacturers face rising input costs that cut into profitability or force price increases that reduce competitiveness, especially against imports priced in cheaper currencies. At the same time, if the dollar remains too strong, U.S. exports become less competitive globally, hurting industries and jobs dependent on exporting. This no-win scenario puts the Federal Reserve and Treasury in a strategic bind. Tightening monetary policy to curb inflation risks slowing growth. Loosening policy to bolster growth could accelerate inflation further. Trump's economic policy, tariffs coupled with currency manipulation, has created tensions that ripple through the economy, raising uncertainty in markets, pressuring political leadership, and destabilizing key sectors. Chapter 10. The Global Forecast. The signs are everywhere. Europe is steadily losing its once mighty industrial base, burdened by soaring energy costs and strained supply chains. U.S. farmers are drowning under unprecedented debt and subsidy reliance, struggling to compete in a rapidly changing global market. Meanwhile, the once dominant U.S. dollar is weakening, its global reserve status challenged by strategic moves from emerging powers. Against this backdrop, China is methodically expanding its economic influence, deepening trade ties, securing discounted energy deals, and investing strategically across continents. By 2027, if current trends continue, the West risks losing its long-held dominance in global economic and geopolitical affairs. China's rise is not a blunt force, but a patient, calculated strategic advance, building alternative financial systems, strengthening partnerships through bilateral trade agreements, and harnessing vast resources to fuel development. It capitalizes on Western missteps: Europe's self-inflicted energy crisis and industrial decline, the US's internal economic struggles and trade fragmentation. This shift is more than a change of economic winners. It signals a fundamental realignment in global power structures. It challenges the prevailing dollar-centric financial system and echoes in capital flows, trade patterns, and diplomatic influence. The multipolar world taking shape demands new strategies and adaptation from Western powers. The pressing question remains: who among the West's political and economic leaders is ready to face this challenge? Are they prepared to rethink policies that have inadvertently accelerated decline? Can they forge pragmatic paths that rebuild competitiveness, restore stable trade relationships, and address deep systemic vulnerabilities? The future is not predetermined. It hinges on decisions made today, in capitals across Europe, Washington, D.C., and beyond. The stakes could not be higher. The time for bold, clear-eyed action is now. These crises are not distant threats. They are unfolding right in front of us. China is rising steadily, reshaping global trade and diplomacy. The West, struggling with internal contradictions and policy missteps, risks falling further behind. Will leaders' courses be corrected with the urgency and pragmatism required? Or is this global power shift permanent, forever changing the balance of influence on the world stage? What do you think? Can the West reclaim its place, or is the era of Chinese-led global leadership inevitable? Comments below. And if you want a sharper, honest analysis on these critical developments, subscribe and stay tuned. The global future is now, and it's unfolding fast. Thanks for watching.